I woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing. Behind me. My apartment is on the top floor. I live alone. There's no one above, no one beside me. Yet each step creaked closer, rhythmically, as if someone had been waiting for this precise moment. The lights flickered once, twice, before stabilizing. I froze, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs refused. The footsteps continued, soft, wet, deliberate, each one synchronized with the trembling in my chest. I whispered my own name, hoping it would anchor me to reality. I reached for my phone, fingers shaking, only to find it dead. The charger was plugged in, the battery full, yet it blinked black. My apartment felt smaller suddenly, suffocating. Shadows pulled in corners. The sound of the steps persisted, relentless. Closer now. Too close. A cold draft brushed my neck. I spun, imagining someone there, but nothing. The room was empty, furniture unmoved, blinds still. Yet the echoing steps continued, matching the pace of my quickening pulse. I backed into the wall, breath catching. Was it real? Or had I imagined it? I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My eyes locked on the hallway behind me. The footsteps stopped, just for a heartbeat. Silence pressed against my ears. And then, another step. I swear I could hear my own blood rushing, each beat louder than the last. Something waited, just beyond my sight. Mornings were usually quiet. I'd make coffee while the sun slowly poured through the blinds. The city hummed far below, distant and harmless. My apartment smelled of old wood and instant coffee. Nothing ever happened here. Life felt predictable, safe. Until last night. I told myself it was a dream. Maybe stress. Maybe too many late nights scrolling online horror stories. My footsteps were imaginary. My pulse was just excitement. Rational explanations rehearsed in my mind. Everything returned to routine, and I forced a smile while unpacking groceries. Work was mundane. Emails, calls, spreadsheets. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Even here, in the office, a tiny part of me remained alert, expecting, what? A shadow in the corner? A whisper? I shook my head and laughed at myself. Normalcy was supposed to feel safe. At lunch, I walked to the rooftop garden. Sunlight warmed my face, breeze tugged lightly at my hair. Birds chirped. Children's laughter floated up from the street. Everything ordinary, nothing threatening. The echo of footsteps felt like a distant memory, though my skin tingled at the thought. Back in my apartment, evenings were routine. I cooked pasta, washed dishes, and watched television. Nothing unusual. The hum of the fridge, the drip of the faucet, the whir of the ceiling fan. It was comforting. Familiar sounds that reminded me I was alone and safe, after all. I'd often sit by the window, watching neighbors move below. Couples returning from dinner, cars pulling in, the occasional shout. Life went on around me, ordinary and predictable. That window had always been my anchor, my reassurance that this world was steady and safe, no matter what shadows lingered in my mind. Weekends were my escape. I visited the bookstore, lingered over new novels, sometimes bought them. The scent of paper, the hushed voices, and the soft shuffle of pages calmed me. There was order here, predictability, a rhythm I could follow. Life had rules, and I obeyed them. My apartment itself was a sanctuary. Small, cluttered with books and plants, nothing out of place. The top floor gave me peace. No neighbors stomping above, no strangers wandering by. I felt untouchable, unbothered. The world outside could be chaotic. Here, I was untouchable. Nights were my favorite. I'd light candles, sip tea, and lose myself in writing. The soft flicker of flames made shadows dance gently across walls, but they were friendly shadows, harmless. A controlled fear, a tiny thrill I allowed myself. Nothing like the terror I imagined last night. Friends would sometimes visit, though rarely. Conversations over laughter and wine, stories shared. We'd leave the door unlocked sometimes, trusting, joking about life. I loved that sense of normality. The idea that my space, my life, was untouched by darkness. For now, I kept routines. Morning coffee, work, rooftop walks, evenings with books. The rhythm of life comforted me. My apartment was a fortress. Shadows were predictable, footsteps predictable, if they even existed. Yet, every once in a while, a twinge of unease prickled the back of my neck. I began to tell myself a mantra. It's over. It was a dream. You're safe. Repeating it in whispers, in thoughts, in sighs. Safe. Nothing can hurt me here. The top floor, the locks, the distance from the street. Safe. I believed it. I wanted to believe it. It started subtly. A creak near the ceiling, soft, almost polite. I paused mid-sip of my tea. My apartment was quiet, familiar. Yet that noise, high above, unexplainable, made my stomach twist. I told myself it was the building settling. Still, I shivered. Later, I heard it again. A faint dragging sound from the hallway. Slow, uneven. I froze, listening. Nothing moved. My mind searched for rationality. A loose tile? Air vent. Nothing fit. The dragging continued for seconds, then vanished, leaving silence that felt far too heavy. The first real scare came when my shower curtain moved. I was sure I had closed it, but a shadow stretched across the white fabric, long and twisted, as if someone had peeked. My heart jumped. I yanked the curtain aside, empty. Nothing. No one. That night, I slept lightly. Every creak of the floor sounded amplified. I felt the familiar dread curling in my chest. A draft brushed my arm. I turned sharply. Nothing. Yet I could swear, another step. Slow. Behind me. I bolted upright, alone in bed. I convinced myself it was fatigue. Stress. Too many horror stories. My apartment had always been quiet. I had always been safe. Still, every night, I noticed shadows where none should exist. Every night, the faintest sound stirred my nerves like static electricity. One evening, the elevator dinged unexpectedly. I don't own a visitor, no friend scheduled. The doors slid open to reveal darkness. I stared into it, frozen. Nothing emerged. I closed the door. Heart racing, I pressed my floor button again. Silence. Too silent. Another evening, dishes rattled in the sink. I hadn't touched them. I froze, listening. Nothing else moved. I approached slowly, half expecting someone to jump from the shadows. There was nothing, but the feeling remained, a pulse of watching, lingering even as I washed each plate. Then came the whispering, barely audible, curling around the corners of my mind. I thought it was my imagination, a trick of fatigue. But the words, soft, broken, seemed urgent, calling my name. I spun, searching. Empty walls. Nothing. Yet I could still hear it. My apartment, once my sanctuary, became unpredictable. Every corner, every door, seemed to hide a secret. Lights flickered with no cause. Windows shivered though the air was still. I told myself, it's nothing. Just sounds, shadows, coincidences. But deep down, I felt watched. One night, I left the lights on, afraid to sleep. I tried to read, tried to distract myself. Pages turned, but I barely saw words. Each shadow stretched differently. Shapes morphed as if alive. And then, a single, deliberate creak from the hallway froze my blood. I tried recording the apartment with my phone. I left it on overnight. In the morning, I played back hours of silence, except for one clip. A faint, dragging step. Slow, methodical, behind me. I hadn't moved the phone. Nobody else had been there. Nobody. My rational mind screamed for explanations. Building noises. Wind. Animals. I replayed the evidence, tried to prove it was nothing. Yet I couldn't ignore the sensation. Someone, or something, was tracing my movements, waiting, patient, just beyond the light. I started double-checking everything. Doors locked, windows closed, lights on timers. I told myself, again and again, you're imagining it. It's nothing. Rational thoughts became shields against fear. Each precaution offered a fleeting sense of control, though my heartbeat betrayed me. pounding as if aware of unseen eyes. I even spoke aloud to reassure myself. It's the building. It's the wind. My voice trembled, echoing back from empty walls. Silence followed, but it felt tense, expectant, as if the shadows themselves waited for me to falter. I laughed nervously, trying to convince both them and myself. My friends dismissed my worry. "It's stress," they said. "You're overthinking." I nodded, smiled, agreed. Rationalization became armor. If I believed it, maybe it wouldn't be real. But at night, even the faintest creak made my skin crawl, and the apartment felt impossibly large and empty. I began keeping a log. Dates, times, sounds. Every noise cataloged. Every shadow described. I told myself it was for analysis, proof of nothing. The act was soothing, methodical, a scientific approach to irrational fear. Yet every entry carried a subtle tension I couldn't erase. Some nights, I slept with a book in hand, reading aloud to drown out imagined whispers. My voice cracked, echoing too loud. Pages flipped nervously under my trembling fingers. I reasoned it was normal, just anxiety, but my gaze darted constantly to the corners, expecting shapes to move. I even staged harmless tricks on myself to test reality, turning lights on and off, making noises in the hallway. Nothing responded. Logic prevailed. I was safe. The apartment was empty. I could breathe, until the subtle dragging sound returned, faint, deliberate, from nowhere. The rationalization began to falter when I found marks on the floor. Faint scratches, almost too precise. I stared, chalking it up to furniture or pets in past apartments. But my apartment had neither. My fingers traced them, hesitant, a cold dread creeping up my arms. I researched apartment noises online. Buildings settle, pipes creak, animals scurry. Everything had a rational explanation, except the timing. The precise rhythm, the stops, the dragging. It didn't match any ordinary sound. Yet I forced belief in science, as if logic could hold back something primal. Even my dreams became suspect. Shadows lingered, twisting shapes I didn't recognize. Sometimes, in the dream, I heard footsteps, perfectly mimicking my own movements. I woke sweating, but tried to rationalize. It's just stress. It's just sleep paralysis. But rational words felt fragile, like paper against fire. I began talking to my reflection, asking if I was losing my mind. The reflection blinked, smiled too slowly. I recoiled, shaking my head. It's a trick of light. It's nothing. I rationalized, over and over, desperate for control, desperate to deny the unseen that prowled my mind and apartment. At times, I left the lights on all night, rationalizing that safety was in brightness. Shadows retreated to corners, but I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Rationality said I was safe. My body screamed otherwise. Each creak, each whisper chipped at my fragile denial. I clung to routines with obsessive precision. Coffee at 7, dishes at 8, shower at 9. Life had order. Rational thought demanded it. But the apartment resisted order. The shadows lingered, the subtle sounds returned, and I realized that logic, rules, and schedules might never be enough. The sounds returned predictably, always at night, always when I thought I was alone. Creaks, drags, whispers, layered like a ritual. I began noticing the intervals, the pauses, the subtle variations. Each night was a performance, rehearsed and patient, designed to unnerve me before I even realized it. I started hearing things during the day. Faint footfalls on hardwood. A soft drag from the kitchen to the bedroom. My rational mind insisted it was impossible. Top floor. No visitors. Yet each sound repeated itself, pattern-like, growing bolder, a subtle insistence I couldn't ignore. Notes scratched across my notebook indicated frequency. The sounds were deliberate, precise, almost intelligent. My pulse jumped as I cataloged them, realizing the pattern's regularity suggested something, or someone, was testing me. I began anticipating footsteps before they happened, yet never prepared enough. Shadows began appearing in corners I swore were empty. They moved just out of the light's reach, elongating and shrinking, timed with the rhythm of the sounds. I followed them with my eyes, heart in my throat. Each night, they danced closer to me. Sometimes, the dragging sound stopped suddenly. My body tensed. Then, just as suddenly, it continued, now behind me, though no one should be there. I spun around each time. Empty, yet the fear settled in my chest like concrete, heavy and immobilizing. Small objects began shifting. A book slightly askew. A spoon moved on the counter. I rationalized. Wind, vibrations, maybe I did it myself unconsciously. But the pattern was unmistakable. Something or someone was tracing my movements, mocking my sense of order. I tried recording again, setting my phone to capture all sounds overnight. The next morning, playback revealed faint dragging, whispered syllables, and an occasional sharp knock. Silence, then movement. Patterns repeated. Not random, not accidental. Someone, or something, was orchestrating this terror deliberately. I stopped sleeping in my bed, instead curling up on the couch with lights on. The pattern persisted, footsteps pacing in time with my pulse. It was always there, predictable yet unpredictable, testing boundaries. Every room became suspect, every corner a potential threat. I even marked time in the apartment, noticing how the sound of steps aligned with hours. Almost like a clock. I couldn't escape it. No room was safe. The pattern was everywhere, ingrained into the very walls, and I began to understand that it wouldn't stop until it chose to. Sometimes, a whisper preceded the steps, urgent and breathless. I froze mid-motion, listening. Here, it seemed to say, or perhaps my mind twisted it. Yet the pause, then the movement, the dragging step, was always precise, following the same mechanical rhythm designed to terrify. I began leaving cameras in corners, trying to capture shadows. Nothing appeared when I watched the footage, yet when I played it back, the same faint silhouettes danced, moving exactly in sync with the sounds. The pattern was undeniable. The apartment itself seemed alive, conspiring against me. Even simple tasks became treacherous. Walking from bedroom to kitchen, I measured each step, trying to avoid triggering the rhythm. Yet somehow, the steps followed me, mirrored me, testing my nerves. The pattern was adaptive, responsive, patient, and I could feel it observing. Every night, the sounds escalated slightly, increasing in boldness. Scratches along walls, whispers closer, footsteps deliberate, certain. I could no longer pretend it was my imagination. The pattern was purposeful, designed to erode my confidence, my sanity, piece by piece. I realized I was not imagining this. Rationalizations had failed. The pattern was real, undeniable, and patient. And as I lay awake, listening to the echoes of footsteps mirroring my own, I understood this was only the beginning. Something, or someone, had begun a long game, and I was already losing. The footsteps stopped following a general rhythm and began to follow me specifically. I walked to the kitchen. A drag echoed behind me, always one beat slower than my own. I froze mid-step. Whoever, or whatever, was there. It wasn't just haunting the apartment. It was hunting me. Doors creaked open when I approached. Closet doors, cabinets, the bathroom, each swinging slowly, almost deliberately, as if testing my reaction. I told myself I was paranoid, yet my pulse raced with every creak. Each movement felt targeted, intimate, designed to make me feel watched in every corner. My name began appearing in subtle ways. A post-it on the counter I hadn't placed. A pen resting at a tilt spelling out the first letters. I rationalized. I must have done it in sleep. But deep down, I knew someone, or something, knew me. Knew my routines. My reflection seemed altered. In the mirror, shadows clung tighter to me. Sometimes it lagged behind. I slightly offset, a smile I hadn't made. I reached for rational explanations. Light, angle, fatigue. But each time I blinked, The sensation of being studied, mirrored, personalized, tightened around my chest. Footsteps now paused when I paused. My heartbeat echoed, and they echoed back, one beat behind. It learned me, adapted to me. Every movement I made was cataloged, measured. I felt like prey in my own home. Every corridor a potential trap, every corner a theater for observation. I tried leaving notes. I see you. Stop following me. At first, nothing. Then I found replies, written in faint scratches along the wood floor. A mocking, intimate communication. The pattern wasn't just repetition anymore. It was dialogue. I realized my presence invited it, and it responded. My possessions shifted, no longer random. Items moved to where I would encounter them next. Books I intended to read placed directly in my path. Shoes positioned to trip me. It wasn't chaos. It was carefully orchestrated, and I was the subject of its experiment. Sometimes I heard whispers of my own fears. Words I had thought aloud, half-formed, repeated back in the dark. Alone, trapped watch. It knew my mind, my thoughts. The personalized terror was worse than any unseen stranger. It had invaded my consciousness, anticipating my panic. Even the lights betrayed me. Bulbs dimmed as I entered rooms. Shadows stretched unnaturally, bending toward me. I moved carefully, holding walls, furniture, hoping for escape. Yet the apartment itself seemed complicit. Each flicker and shift felt like deliberate mockery, an intimate attention I didn't want. I tried speaking aloud, bargaining, pleading. Leave me alone. I'm not worth it. My own voice was weak, shaking. The response was immediate. Footsteps quickened, scratches intensified. A shadow lingered longer in the hallway. I realized it understood fear, and fear alone entertained it. Sleep became impossible. I lay awake, heart pounding, eyes darting. Every shadow, every corner, seemed to twitch with purpose. Each sound was tuned to my attention. Each faint whisper or creak personalized itself to my habits, my life. I wasn't just haunted, I was hunted. Notes began appearing on my furniture. I'm here, don't move, soon. The handwriting was jagged, human-like, yet impossible. I hadn't written it. Nobody else had keys. It was personalized, direct, intimate, cruel. My apartment, my sanctuary, was now a theater for this entity's obsession with me. I tried leaving the apartment, running to the streets below, but the footsteps followed, fading only when I reached the sidewalk. I couldn't escape the apartment. Its influence lingered. The pattern, once random, was now targeting me personally, reading my every move, preparing for something I couldn't yet imagine. Panic became constant. I could no longer perform even basic routines without the sensation of being watched, followed, manipulated. I realized the apartment itself had become a cage, and I, the prey. The personalized attention of the footsteps was relentless, intimate, and utterly terrifying. I stopped answering calls and texts. Even my friends' voices felt distant, like echoes from another world. I needed silence to hear the patterns, the footsteps, the subtle dragging of the unseen. Isolation became safety, though it tightened the grip of the fear around me. The apartment seemed to breathe with me, shrinking, expanding, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. Every creak of wood, every whisper of air became amplified, intimate. I realized the walls weren't walls anymore. They were listeners, collaborators in this endless surveillance. I barricaded doors, windows, even closets. Nothing stopped it. Footsteps adapted, whispering shifted, shadows elongated differently. My isolation meant nothing. The entity, or entities, moved freely, aware of my attempts at separation. The apartment itself had become a maze, designed to trap me, to observe every panic-driven choice. I stopped leaving my bedroom entirely, curling up with blankets over my head. Even then, I could hear it. Footsteps pacing outside, whispering, dragging something across the floor. The isolation I sought only intensified its focus, honing in on my fear like a predator closing on prey. I considered leaving the city, moving far away. But the sensation followed me, haunting every thought. I imagined a hotel room, a stranger's apartment, yet in my mind, the pattern persisted. It didn't matter where I was. I had carried the footsteps with me. Days blurred into nights. I barely ate. My body weakened. I spoke less, whispered only when necessary. The footsteps never paused. Even when I sat, shivering in a corner, they circled, pacing, dragging, whispering. Isolation wasn't comfort. It was a cage I had built with my own fear. Mirrors became dangerous. I refused to look at my reflection. When I accidentally did, I noticed shadows that weren't mine, lingering just behind my shoulder. I turned quickly, and nothing was there. Isolation deepened my paranoia, and the apartment seemed to close in, shrinking to the size of my terror. I stopped turning on lights at night. Darkness was safer, or so I thought. In fact, the shadows thrived, moving closer, whispering louder. My isolation magnified every noise, every whisper, every step. The entity had learned the geometry of my fear, trapping me in a world of its design. I tried talking to someone once, a voice call to a friend. I whispered the events, barely audible. The response was static, and then my phone cut out. Silence followed. I felt it, a presence in the room, aware of my attempt to reach out. Isolation had become absolute. My food grew cold beside me. I barely noticed. I slept less, surviving in short bursts of awareness. Every creak, every whisper, every drag of an unseen weight reminded me that no one could intervene. The footsteps were patient, omnipresent, and I was completely alone. I considered leaving notes for someone to find me. I wrote them in trembling handwriting, hiding them around the apartment. Yet the footsteps always preceded me, moving objects, altering placement. My messages of desperation were ignored, or perhaps intercepted. Isolation was total. I stopped time altogether, existing only in tense moments, frozen, watching, listening. My world had become the pattern. My own thoughts were taunted by echoes of footsteps. Every attempt at normalcy failed. I understood now, my isolation wasn't by choice. It was enforced. And as I lay in darkness, shivering, heart racing, I realized the apartment itself was alive in ways I couldn't comprehend. It listened, it learned, it adapted. I was alone, yes, but never safe. The footsteps weren't just behind me. They were everywhere, always, and I could not escape. I finally saw it, or him, a shadow detached from the corner, tall, impossibly thin, face hidden in darkness. My breath caught, body frozen. The footsteps had stopped, but now, in the silence, I felt the weight of those watching eyes. I realized it had been inside the apartment all along. The mirrors confirmed it. Reflections warped, showing a figure standing just behind me, silent, unmoving, yet impossibly present. My reflection didn't blink. The figure did, in perfect synchronization with me, just a fraction of a second later. I could no longer deny it. The whispers became words. Clear, precise. You cannot leave. You belong here. The voice was my own, distorted, mocking, yet undeniably foreign. I stumbled back, crashing into the wall, yet the words repeated, patient, cold, and intimate, designed to break my last defenses. Then I understood. The footsteps, the patterns, the personalized attention, they weren't random. They were training me, preparing me, shaping my fear. The apartment itself was a vessel, and I, the prey, was being molded into something it could control, something it could never let go. I tried to flee, but the doors warped before me. The hallway stretched impossibly long. The apartment wasn't a building anymore. It was a labyrinth. The footsteps echoed endlessly, circling me, guiding me, hurting me, forcing me to confront the impossible. There was no escape. I saw glimpses of the previous tenants, reflected in walls, shadows twisted into their terrified faces. They were all here, trapped in this endless loop, their fear feeding the pattern, their bodies absent, their minds absorbed. And I understood, with sickening clarity, I would join them. As the figure advanced, slow and deliberate, the whispers surrounding me became a chorus of my own past panic, anticipation, and terror. Every step, every shadow, every heartbeat had been orchestrated to this moment. I wasn't being haunted. I was being assimilated. Days later, the apartment looked normal again. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood, furniture in place, nothing out of order. Yet I could feel it, something lingering in corners, in shadows, in the faint hum of the ceiling fan. The pattern wasn't gone. It was waiting. I tried to leave. The hallway stretched endlessly, doors appearing where none should exist. My legs refused to move freely. Panic clawed at me. The city outside felt impossibly far, like a dream I could see but never reach. I realized I was trapped in another dimension of fear. Friends knocked once, then never again. Phones rang with static. Messages went unanswered. My calls returned nothing but silence. The apartment's isolation had extended beyond walls. The footsteps followed me in my mind. The whispers threaded through my thoughts. There was no refuge from this cage. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, existing only in short bursts of awareness. Every moment was measured, cataloged, observed. The entity had personalized my terror so completely that even involuntary movements provoked it. I had become a component of the pattern, a prisoner of my own fear. Sometimes, I hear other voices, echoes of previous tenants, or perhaps remnants of my own sanity breaking. They whisper warnings, half-formed, fading before I can understand. The apartment becomes a chorus of despair. Every shadow, every creak, every flicker of light is imbued with consciousness, waiting for me. Mirrors now show me differently. Not entirely myself. Eyes slightly hollow, face stretched, hair moving unnaturally. I watch the reflection mimic my movements fractionally behind, and I shiver. Even when I blink, it doesn't. The footsteps, the shadows, the whispering, they've merged with me. I write this now, barely coherent, aware someone, or something, maybe reading these words. The apartment has taught me patience, fear, and obedience. The pattern has been imprinted, and I know that nothing outside these walls can undo it. I am no longer alone. I am part of it. Sometimes, I leave the lights on, pretend to sleep. Shadows cling closer, listening. Footsteps echo, dragging slowly, just behind me. I breathe shallowly, eyes darting, praying it doesn't decide to advance. Every sound is calculated, every movement observed. The apartment has eyes. I have no escape. If you ever visit, don't look too long at the corners. Don't follow the shadows. And never, ever count the footsteps. They may be behind you, waiting, patient. I know, they're always patient. And now so am I.